The Boston Celtics found a way to turn their season around in stellar fashion. Early on in the season, before the new year started, they were sitting at 17 and 19, which is a decent amount below league average. But somehow they've found a way to turn around their entire season. They're currently sitting at 49 and 30, which is second in the league. Sorry, second in the Eastern Conference and fifth in the league. So how was Boston able to turn around a subpar effort, especially based on expectations, into being a possible finals contender and a top five team? I think it was expected that they were going to be a finals contender at the beginning of the year, and then it looked really, really poor throughout the very first 40 or so games right before the new year started, and somehow they turned it around. Now, is that players? Is that coaching? Is that just working as a team because you have new players in the organization? Well, that's what I'm going to be talking to you about. So, first things first, my name is John. This is the Sports Advocate. I mean, I think we all know how the YouTube stuff works. Like, dislike, do whatever you want. It really helps the algorithm in it. And most importantly, it helps me know that I need to get better and also know if people are enjoying the content. Go ahead and leave some criticisms in the comments, and also just did you expect Boston to be a top 10, top 5 team in the league at the beginning of the year? Not did you believe that they were going to be that at the new year, but at the beginning of the year, did you think that they were going to be a top team in the league? Also, subscribe if you like this content. I do NBA, NHL, and NFL. Let's go ahead and get right into this, though. Like I said, they're 49 and 30 at this current moment. They were 17 and 19 before the new year started, and then since the new year, they're 32 and 11, which is that's like an insane record. A 3-1 record is phenomenal. They were just the one seed, I want to say, like last week, and they ended up falling off a little bit with the Miami Heat taking back over. There's only 3 games left in the season, but I thought there's not really a better time to do this, because if I wait till the season ends, then I'm going to be missing doing videos on playoff basketball, and I don't want to do that. I want to be able to do videos on playoff basketball, but still really wanted to cover this because just the turnaround for this team in one singular season, not like a long-term turnaround, but one season turnaround, it was actually amazing to witness. And also, since the All-Star break, they're 15 and 4. Again, that's a 3-to-1 ratio. I saw some people, it was 13 and 3, and then when I counted, it was 15 and 4. So I'm assuming when they posted that, it was like 5 days ago or something like that. But they're 15 and 4 since the All-Star break, 32 and 11 since the new year, and like that's just crazy to think about, that a team was able to turn their entire season around and just flip the page that quickly, especially right after the trade deadline. They didn't really add a lot. They traded away some pieces, and they added a couple small bench pieces. Daniel Tice came back. As a Bulls fan, I obviously know what his worth is. He's very good at hustle and defense. Not a great shooter. They got rid of was it Dennis Schroeder, I think. They traded him away. They now have Marcus Smart at a starter, which honestly he's been doing very, very well. And they just have a lot of talent outside of, obviously, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who are their top 2 pieces. And the funny thing is, at the trade deadline and when they were doing so bad early in the year, everyone was talking about which do you build around and trade the other person away. That's what everyone was saying. But now, as we can see based on this, you don't really have to, and that's a very good sight to see. So let's go ahead and get into some of the statistics. I'm going to be talking about the yearly statistics. I'm not going to try and do each player's statistics since the new year. You'll get the gist of it when I do the whole year's, stats, all that stuff. So we're going to start with Jason Tatum. Obviously, their best player on their team. Well, arguably, I guess, depends on what kind of player you like more. But I'd say that he's probably their best player. And one thing, at least I haven't heard his name a lot, but I'm surprised Jason Tatum hasn't got any MVP conversation talks this year. I know they started out bad, but when you're second in the East and you're fifth in the league and you turned it around like crazy and you're averaging 27 and 8 rebounds per game, I mean, how is that not somewhere close to MVP? Now I'm not saying it's top 5. I'm not even saying that he's really should be like, hey, this guy is an MVP, but I think he should be talked about a little bit more. Right now, it's pretty much like Joel Embiid, Joker. Devin Booker's been in a little bit. That's That's like the main three people. Oh, Giannis, of course. But that's about it. You don't really hear a lot of other names. Sometimes you hear DeMar, but he really fell off the second half of the year. But I haven't heard Tatum's name a lot, and I think it deserves to be up there. I heard Ja a little bit, but Grizzlies have been doing so good without Ja. Should he really be up that high? So I don't know. I just think that he should get a little more votes, and maybe it's sneaking underneath the radar for me, and he is getting votes. I'm not quite sure on that. But like I said, Jason Tatum's averaging 27 points per game and 8 rebounds per game. Very good numbers. Jaylen Brown, their second star, 23.7 points per game and 6.1 rebounds per game. And one thing you'll notice, and when I looked at the stats, it actually kind of surprised me a little bit. This team doesn't really jump off the screen for assists. And like all of these top players that they have, only one of them is really good at assisting on scores and all that stuff. But somehow I think they're 13th in the league for assists, which just surprised me a little bit. When I was looking through every player's stats individually, it didn't seem like they were having a lot, but overall somehow they're still above league average, which is good news for them, of course. Next up we have Robert Williams, who has 4.6. No, sorry, my handwriting's bad. 9.6 rebounds per game and 2.2 blocks per game, which 2.2 blocks is crazy. That's top 5 in the league. And then you got Marcus Smart with 5.9 assists per game and 1.7 steals per game. Again, top 5 in the league for steals. So this team is very good on defense. I'm going to be talking about that in 1 second, their defensive rating. But they have been very, very good on defense, and that is something that you have to be very happy about, obviously, as an organization, as a team, and that's going to help you win a lot of games. If you don't have to score as much to win a game, you're going to win more games. And that's a big reason why they have been doing so well. And I will say, since the new year, they've been first in their defensive rating, and I'm not sure exactly where they sat at the previous year before the new year rotated over. But now we're going to switch over to as a team, because I think that's sorry about that. Obviously, that's very important. It doesn't really matter how many individual players are doing very good on a team. Your team can still be playing poorly if, as a team, you're not working well together. I mean, let's just think of some examples. Here, I'm gonna grab my phone real quick. Let's look at the standings. Standings. Okay, and why I want to do this is I want to look at some of these lower tier teams and talk about some of the stars they have and just prove. Well, first off, the Rockets. I mean, they have a bunch of young stars who are still playing very good, and they're obviously not winning games because as a team they're not good. Oklahoma City Thunder, you have Shea, and I mean, there's not a whole bunch, but there's obviously always going to be talent on every team. That's how the NBA is going to work. Let's look at some of these other teams. New York Knicks. You have Julius Randle, who has not been playing very good this year, but he's clearly very talented based on last year. And, R.J. Barrett, who's also very talented, and he really came into his own this year. So you can, as a lower tier team, you can still have a lot of talent on your team. I mean, even look at the number 10 seed, Charlotte Hornets, on the east side. LaMelo Ball, very, very talented. All-star, rookie of the year, all that stuff. You got Gordon Hayward, who before his injuries was very good, and I still think he is very good right now. So you can have talent on these lower tier teams. I mean, Indianapolis had a lot of talent, and then they kind of blew up their roster a little bit, but they were still below the top 10, and then they chose to blow up their roster because, and most importantly, you look at the Lakers. The Lakers, who are now out of playoff contention. And obviously they've had a lot of injuries, but you got to look at the talent on that team. I mean, Giannis, LeBron, Anthony Davis, and you have all of these older people that are also very talented, but they're not able to put together the Nets. You had Kyrie, you had James Harden, you had Kevin Durant, you had Blake Griffin, who's still playing at a pretty good level, and they're not a top in the East. So it doesn't matter how much talent you have individually, it's as a team, and that's the main reason why Boston's been able to turn around. And I'm sorry if we want to rant right there, but I really had to prove my point right there. So let's jump into these as a team statistics for you. First off, they're fourth in rebounds, which is also going to be able to help you get If you're fourth in rebounds, you're going to get more second chance opportunities, which is lead to more scoring. And if you're fourth in reboundings, you're going to be able to get more rebounds on the defensive end, so they're going to score less on you. So that's very good on both sides of the ball. Next up, they're second in blocks, and that's a big thing with Robert Williams, is a big help for that. But second in blocks, again, going to be huge for your defensive rating. They're not getting as many shots really towards the basket. That's huge. And they're second in free throw percentage. That's not really a huge statistic long term. Obviously, it's going to be a big help. You're going to get more points because you're shooting very well. But if you didn't know, the higher teams for free throw percentage are only still at like about 80s. And normally it's like 50, 40, 90 is like a player's good shooting. But as a team, I think they were like 81 and they were second in the league. So that's a little bit of a surprise. But, I mean, you got to expect it. You got some of those really deep backups and all that are going to miss more shots. And so I guess it kind of makes sense. Next up, their second in net rating, which is a big thing. If you don't know what net rating is, because I had to kind of double check it because I wasn't quite sure. Net rating is your offensive rating minus your defensive rating, and then that number gets compared to all the rest. So they're second in the league for that, and it was like a 7.1, I want to say. So what that's telling you, if you're positive, that means that your offense is doing very well and your defense is doing well, kind of. In this case, it definitely does. So a lower defensive rating means that you're doing very well defensively. So I think they had like a 106, but if they would have had like a 100, then they would have a better defensive rating. And offense, the other way around. A higher number means better. So they have a good high number and they have a good low number. I want to say it was like 116 and 107, I want to say was their thing. So they had a 7.1. So you're doing very well. And a big reason for that is because their defense has been doing so well that they have been able to have a bigger number, a bigger gap in that number. Because they're not top 5 in their offensive rating, but they are number 1 in the entire league for defensive rating. And that's a big help since the new year started. But that's number 1 for defense rating, at least, in the entire league. And that a big assist for that on Marcus Smart and his 1.7 steals per game, Robert Williams and his 2.2 blocks per game. But 2 players aren't going to be able to carry you to number 1 in the league. It just won't. So it's the rest of the team too. And Jaylen Brown is one of the best two-way guards in the league, and he's a big assist for that, obviously. Daniel Tice, again, off of the bench, is playing very well. And speaking of bench, there's normal net rating, and then there's bench net rating. And their bench net rating is 5th in the league. So what that's telling you is that their bench, so that not their top 5, but everyone else on the team, has a better offensive rating than defensive rating. Because, again, it's minus each other. So if they're 5th in the league, that's very good. And I do want to say bench net rating, I think they were like 2.3 or something like that, was 5th in the league. So it's obviously not as great, but you don't expect it to be. But they were still 5th in the league. So overall, the team in general, from top to bottom, is very good defensively and offensively, which is a big help. Because even if you're first, well, if you are first in the entire league for net rating, it's clear that your bench is also good. It's very clear, because you wouldn't be first in the league if your bench net rating was like 14th. I mean, unless your top 5 was playing out of their minds and no one ever scored on your top 5, but they scored nonstop. But that's just not going to happen. So if your bench net rating's high, that probably means that your normal net rating of your team is going to be high, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. 5th for bench and 1st in the entire league for the actual net rating. Sorry, 2nd in the entire league for net rating. And 1st for defense. And that's a big reason why they're able to do that. I've already talked about that a lot. So now that we've talked about players, we've talked about the team itself as overall, I don't really want to cover the coach. I'm terrible at covering coaching. I just don't really understand all of the coaching philosophies and how big of a difference one simple change might be for a team. Like if you're running man all year long and you're not doing good and you switch to zone and you do really good, I don't understand all of the actual statistical probabilities and what goes into the coaching. So I'm not going to stand here and act like it and judge their coaching and all that. If they're able to turn around this quickly, they obviously have a very good coach, but I'm not going to get into that too much. And the only other real pillar, you have coaching, you have offense and defense, bench, and that's about it. The last thing would be practicing and training, and that's another thing with the coaching. So once we've talked about all these things, now we're going to move on to what you would say is probably the most important, at least at this point with 3 games remaining in the season, and that is your playoff clutch. Being able to play very well in the playoffs. And obviously, with them having plenty of previous experience, Eastern Conference Finals, and from everything in between, they've been together for almost 5 years now, I want to say, as a team. They obviously have a lot of experience, and that's very good for a team. That's very good for your top players, and I think it's gonna turn out very well for them. If they're second in the East right now, I guess with the play-in, it's gonna alter who they would go against. But if I had to assume, they'll probably end up going against like the Nets, because I want to say the Nets are 8th right now. Yeah, the Nets are 8th. 10th is Charlotte. I think 9th is Atlanta, something like that. Yeah. But I think they'll end up going against the Nets, and I think they match up very well. Obviously, Jason Tatum was probably going to end up matching on Kevin Durant. I don't see much of anything wrong with that. And you have Jaylen Brown, who will probably end up sliding over to Kyrie, or if Kyrie's playing, which I don't know why he wouldn't be. I know Kyrie always ends up getting hurt in the playoffs, but I don't think he'd get hurt that early. You got Jaylen Brown right there. You're matching him very well. Marcus Smart could also play on Kyrie Irving. He's very, very good on defense. Actually, I think Marcus Smart would probably line up on Kyrie. And then at your big men, Nets don't have great big man talent, but when you have Robert Williams, if you're not worrying about a huge threat at your center position and you have someone as good at defense as Williams, he's able to kind of set himself up down in the post and in the paint and take away drives, especially from Kyrie, who is very, very crafty with his layup packages and also some of his like kind of floater mid-ranges. And Williams is going to be a big help for them in that area, since he doesn't have to really cover a lot of great talent. I mean, you got Aldridge and Blake Griffin, but I mean, come on, it's not 10 years ago, 5 years ago. They're not at their all-star peak anymore. They're pretty much just role players at this point, if we're all being honest with ourselves. And it works for the Nets, but it's going to allow Williams to help for these big stars like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on the Nets. And now, obviously, I'm assuming that they're going to play the Nets, and they might not play him. But I just don't see the Nets losing a one-game matchup. I just don't, because I mean, look at Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant will drop 50 if he has to, and Kyrie's been playing very well. And if Kyrie's playing, we saw him drop 50 back-to-back, I think it was, or 40. So I think they'll play the Nets. But I think Boston matches up very well with them, especially in a 7-game series. It would definitely be some back and forth, but I see it like a 4-2 series if it ends up being those two against each other, and that'll work very well. And while we were talking about playoff clutchness, that was a long rant. The last 3 statistics I want to cover, and these all relate to the record, but is very important. And these are all statistics that I've been looking at for pretty much every team, especially my Chicago Bulls, because these statistics have not been good for the Chicago Bulls, which is very sad for me to say. They're 33-9 in games that are within 10 points, up or down, obviously. So the final score is within 10 points. They're 33-9, which is amazing if you ask me. I want to say when it's within 3 points that there were actually negative win-loss there though. But it was only 8 games or so that's not too big of a worry. When you're 33-9 in games within 10, you're not very much worried about those tight games. You're going to find a way to battle through it. Next up, the 32-18 versus the conference, Eastern Conference, which is obviously very good news for the Boston Celtics in the playoffs, because you're playing the Eastern Conference until the finals. And if you're 32-18, which means you're winning a 2-to-1 ratio, then theoretically, now it's not exactly sure, but theoretically you would end up at a 4-2 series every series, but you're not going to do that. But theoretically, that's what would happen. And, I mean, that's clearly good news if you're worried about competition. And I don't have every statistical record between this team and this team throughout, because it'd just be too much to list, Boston Celtics wins versus Heat win-loss, and then it would be too much. But 32-18 against all Eastern Conference Finals is very, very good. And lastly, which is kind of surprising when you look at all these stats, that they have a 25-20 record against teams above 500, which obviously not as bad as Chicago Bulls. But a 25-20, you're only winning a little bit more than you're losing against teams above 500, which you're going to be facing pretty much only teams against 500 when you're in the playoffs. And yeah, that's just kind of surprising to me. And I think their last 3 games are all against teams above 500, so they could make it like 28-20, so that you can make it look a little bit better. But the thing is, I don't know how much of that was before the new year started. So they were 17-19 against teams before the new year. So maybe if they were like 3-10 against 500 teams, then that would be a big alteration of their 25-20 now. So I'm not exactly sure on that. But nonetheless, 25-20 against 500 teams and up, it's not a very great statistic to look at, especially when you're hoping to make a deep run in the playoffs, whether that's Eastern Conference Finals, or if you're a Celtics fan, you want to make it into the actual finals. And if I'm being honest, I think this that they can make a run. Like truly, I think that they can make a run. And I don't know how long a run quantifies. Like Atlanta made a run last year and they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. So what quantifies as a run? Do you have to make it the Eastern Conference Finals for it to be a run, or do you just have to make it past the first round? Well, that's not a run. You have to make it past first round. So I guess Eastern Conference Finals would be a run, or the finals. And I think they can make a run, but it's going to be pretty tight. It's going to depend on matchups and locations. And I will say Boston could still drop. I don't know if they can climb anymore. I think they're 2 games behind first place, and they have 3 games remaining. They might be able to climb to first. That's not super likely, and I don't know how likely it is from the fall to third. Probably not very likely. But what that would mean if they're at second is they're going to end up playing Milwaukee, possibly. I mean, if you're in the Eastern Conference Finals, you can play pretty much anyone, Milwaukee, the Heat, or anything. But you're going to end up playing one of these top teams that are competing for the finals, who are expected to go to the finals at some point. You're going to be playing one of them, whether that's Milwaukee, whether that's the Heat. I still think that some people believe the Nets can, and I don't know why they couldn't if they're playing at a high level with Kyrie and KD. But it's hard to see with how their regular season went. But again, Kyrie missed a lot of time with all the COVID restrictions. So maybe they'll do a lot better now that Kyrie's playing full time. But yeah, I guess that is it. The Boston Celtics really found a way to turn around their entire season and just prove everyone right at the beginning of the year and prove everyone wrong that was denying them at the halfway point of the year at the beginning of the new year. So I guess that covers it all. The Boston Celtics really wowed me this year, especially with how poorly they were playing before and how well they've played since the new year. And it's really wowed me, and it's been something very fun to watch. Obviously, I'm not a Celtics fan at all. I pretty much hate them as a Bulls fan, especially that last time that the Bulls, who just made the playoffs for the first time in 5 years, last time that they were in the playoffs was against the Boston Celtics, and the Bulls were up quite a bit in the series and ended up losing because Isaiah Thomas was playing out of his darn mind, and that was the situation that I don't really want to talk about because that's very personal for Isaiah Thomas, but I think everyone knows what it was. And that was when Rondo and D Wade and Jimmy Butler were all in the Bulls. So I kind of do hate the Celtics a little bit, but at the same time, I'm a huge fan of Tatum and Brown. So if they do well, I won't be super upset. Obviously, there's some other teams that would rather have win it, but I wouldn't be upset if the Boston Celtics did go on a run. And honestly, I'm cheering for them more than I am the Nets and a couple other teams like that. But I think I'm cut off there. No need to rant anymore. Thank you for tuning in. Sorry about the lighting. It's really dark and raining outside at this moment, and that's normally where I get most of my light from, is from outside. I'm probably going to have a video up in the next day or two about my MVP race, and then I might take a little break from basketball videos until the playoffs actually starts, and that will only be about a week. It probably won't even be a week. I'll probably end up making a video anyways. But there's plenty of hockey videos I have ideas for. I need to make an NFL video. I haven't in so long. But yeah, thank you for tuning in. I'll go ahead and click any of, scroll through all my stuff. I have plenty of all sorts of sports. I just had a video. My last basketball video, which I think I'll probably have pop up here at the end, was the DeMar DeRozan, how he turned it around, how he proved everyone wrong, going from the worst offseason signing until an MVP candidate at this point. I think that's what I'll have popping up over here, and then I'll have my subscribe button, which I would very much appreciate if you did click on that and turn on the notifications, because I have plenty more content like this coming out. I'm a very small YouTuber, but this is something that I very, very much enjoy, and even if I'm only getting like below 100 views, I hope that those people that are viewing it are enjoying this. So now I'm just going to cut to the end because there's no point in me rambling on anymore. You'll see me in the next video, I sure hope. So as always, I hope I taught you something. I hope I made you smile, hope I made you laugh, and you guys be safe out there.